Hey everyone, I'm Amy Hood of Hoodzpah. Welcome to another day of Adobe Type Bootcamp. We've had a great week so far. If you haven't caught the last days, day 1, 2, and 3, definitely check it out. Andrew, our producer, put up a playlist on YouTube. So just go to the Adobe Live YouTube and you can see all the playlists there. There's also a ton of other great content. So make sure to subscribe. I love watching other people's process. I'm so nosy, but it's also just such a great way to learn. So definitely subscribe. Welcome back. It's day 4. We've been doing some amazing things. Let me share my screen with you because I want to show you what we've worked on so far and show you what we have planned for today. So day 1, we did type pairing. That was fun. On day 2, we did sketch to vector lettering, which was a blast. It was a whirlwind. I hope I spoke slow enough for you all to understand, but definitely go back and watch that one if you're interested in that. Yesterday, we customized fonts, which is super fun. This is my font, Venice Boulevard, and we added serifs, and oof, does it look good. And now I have a new font that I want to make. So that was super fun. And actually, some friends on Twitter made a great note. They said you should definitely warn people that they should check their EULAs on their fonts, which is your end user license agreement, because you want to make sure that the font license allows you to change things. It is usually under fair use that you can adjust a font for your own use as long as you're not distributing it, which means like selling it as your own font or, giving it to friends. So you should be good, but it can never hurt to just check your licenses and make sure you're allowed to do what you're doing. So today, day 4, we're going to do some quick, I hate to say it, but we're doing some hacks. I really don't like that word because there's never really a cheat to anything in my mind. It's like there's still work to be done, but there is definitely a shortcut and there's definitely an easy way to do things, right? If you kind of know what you're going for. So we're going to work on some fun things today. I've dragged in my sketches that we did on day 2, and I'm going to show you, number 1, how to use the width variation tool. Number 2, how to use the calligraphic tool, and then how to use the pathfinder to make some really fun custom lettering. So let's jump right into it. I think we'll start with the calligraphic tool. So that's just using your brush tool. So we're going to go up to here to brush definition, which is usually up here. And we're going to click in that little caret, and I'm going to go to this hamburger icon, and I'm going to say new brush. And we want to make a calligraphic brush. That's that top one. Hit OK, and it's going to bring up this dialog. And what you want to do is these dots on the top and the bottom, that will allow you to manually adjust the width, but you can also see that my slider is also adjusting down here. So I'm going to adjust that to like 6% because I want it to be super high contrast. Basically, the lower the percentage of the roundness, the flatter your calligraphic brush is going to be. So I want that to be super low. I'm going to set it to 6%. And then for the size, I want it to be really big because we're going to be working big. My artboard right now is 3000 pixels by 3000 pixels. So let's go to 70 points there. And for the angle, since we're doing calligraphy, usually calligraphy is using 45-degree angles, right? So I want to do either 45 or some variation of 45. So let's just start with that for now. And we'll hit OK. So now if I go over into my white space here, I'm going to grab my pencil, and I'm going to make sure that I have my calligraphic brush selected that I just made. And if you hold down the Shift key while you're drawing with your pencil, it's going to limit your pencil to only be able to draw in 45-degree angles. And that's great because then we can get our super thin thins and our super thick thicks just like we like them. So that was a 45-degree angle that I just drew. Now, if I continue my path by just selecting at the end point and continuing down, I'm holding Shift, you can see how I'm getting these great calligraphic looks. So let's start again, and let's just try to do something simple like an O. So if we keep holding that Shift key, and we kind of just use angles, think about it angularly, think about the title treatments and the old Peter Pan movies and stuff like that, the Disney movies. You can see I've got a pretty cool O going already. And you don't have to just use the pencil tool. You can use the pen tool. So if I go to my pen tool, the shortcut for that is P, and I just start drawing and using exact 45-degree angles, whether it's a 90-degree straight up and down. You can see I'm getting some cool stuff going on. So I'm going to go back to my pencil tool, and I'm going to do some flourishes because I think we need some swashes here. We need this to be a little bit more extra. So let's just draw some little curly cues here. I can draw them and then just select them and move them around. And this kind of looks like an enlightened manuscript, doesn't it? And you can, again, hold the Shift key if you want to have those really nice thins. So you can see how cool that looks and how quick we did that. What was that, like 2 minutes? We've only been streaming for 2 minutes, and it's pure magic, you all. So that's one way you can use that. The other thing that's kind of cool is, say you want to do an O. Let's just stick with our O example. If I just go ahead and select my circular tool from the toolbar and I hold Shift and Option as I'm drawing it, it will create my shape from the center outwards, and it will hold it to a perfect circle. You can see I've got this really cool perfect circle, but that it's got that calligraphic brush on it. It looks amazing. So we can get our pencil tool again and just kind of start adding some fun swashes, see how it goes. You can delete it. You can start again if it doesn't look good, like that didn't look good. And you can see how it works. The cool thing about, and Ryan Benoit in the chat says this is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. The cool thing about the pencil tool that I love, it can be hard to use at first, but the great news is you can just keep redrawing over it and it'll adjust your path. So if I draw on top of my path that I already have, and I just kind of start where I want to start and I hold my Shift key down, it'll help me get those endpoints a little bit more thin like I want them. And then I can scale. I can say maybe this looks better if it's a little bit smaller. Maybe I want an eyedropper to get the weight back to be consistent, but you can see how cool this is looking. Colby and Momin say, yep, it's looking good. I think so too. It's looking dope. So that looks awesome. What if we wanted to do something more like an L? There's so many cool different ways you can play with this. So if I get back to my pencil tool, I'm just going to hold down my little key. I'm going to go in a little and then down. Like there's so many fun ways you can do this. Maybe we go like that for an L, and then we can pick up our path again here, maybe add a swash up here. Maybe we add a little something here. There's so many different cool things you can do. Maybe we kind of go like that. But the great news is like, this is so forgiving. Like you can just play. It doesn't have to be stressful. You can just kind of see what works. It'll take a while to get the hang of, where the thicks and thins are. And sometimes it'll be annoying because, in real life with a real brush, you could pick up your path, or you could pick up your pencil, your pen, your broad nibbed kind of pen, and you could, put the stress axis on a different, angle. It wouldn't have to just be this 45-degree, but you can make multiple calligraphic brushes and really have fun with it. So like if we copied some of these cool little swashes over, we say, how does this look? And it looks pretty cool. It's like a pretty fun effect with like little to no effort. It looks nice. And if you need help, like I said yesterday, I recommend looking at the Letterform archive, and the New York Public Library has a digital archive. There's also fonts in use. You can pull off some fonts from Adobe just to kind of see how are they using, in other black lettering or fonts, how are they using, the broads and the thins. So that looks great. Calligraphic brush, that's tip number 1. So if we were going to do something else, like say we had a piece of lettering that looked like this that we wanted to vectorize and we wanted to do it kind of quick. The reason that these kind of lettering pieces can be really tough is because the thins are so thin and the thicks are so thick. So I like to use a width variation tool sometimes. Now, this can be very difficult and it does take some finessing, but once you kind of get the hang of it, it can be a real time saver. So if I get my pen tool out, and I'm going to go ahead and just unlock this layer and just turn my sketch to 50% because it's a little bit dark. Okay, and we'll lock that again. So I'm going to get my pen tool and I'm just going to start drawing. I'm just going to do this S to start. And we'll kind of go a little bit fast just so we can get it done. And I'm just using like we used the other day, I'm using the Extrema to find out where I'm going to place my points. For the most part, sometimes I break the rules because sometimes you just gotta. But for the most part, I'm using the Extrema. And we can adjust our handles after the fact by just using A as our direct select. That's how you get that for the shortcut. And you can pull in these handles and say, I want that a little shorter. I want to finesse that. I want to move this down. And then you can pick your path back up and kind of keep going. Okay, so we've got this. And I've got one side of my S, you can see. Now I need to draw the other side. Now where these thins are really thin, actually no, we're using the width variation, so forgive me. I'm just going to kind of adjust my points so that they're more in the middle of my character. They're kind of forming a spine or like a skeleton. So I'm adjusting a little bit. That looks nice. So what I'm going to do is just option drag this over so you all can see it a little bit better. And we can still see the sketch for reference, but this kind of helps us out. So what you'll do first is, well, first we'll select this and just kind of fix that. That looks terrible. And that, wow, that's a little bit janky. I don't know how that happened. Cool. So first what you're gonna do is select your width variation tool. And let's see, what is that? I always have to like really, oh, here it is, width tool. So it looks like this one. It's this one right here. If I click on that, and I've got it set to 1 point as the base right now. That's how thin the very thins are always going to be. But maybe I want that to be a little thicker. We'll see once we kind of start trying. But all I'll do is grab that width variation tool, and at the spine where you want your S to be the thickest, it's going to hold the most weight. I'm just going to click and drag out, and it'll preview for you. You can see I can preview like how thick this is going to be. Well, look at that. Look at that, you all. Look how amazing. It looks beautiful already. I'm seeing that the thicks are very, very heavy in comparison to my thins. So I think I'm going to undo that and just go back to maybe like 3 on the thins. And I'm going to finesse this a teens, and let's try it again. So we'll grab our width variation tool. We'll pull it out from the spine, and we've got this great looking thing here. So maybe if I think about like, where else do I want it to be a little bit thick? Probably right here, maybe not that thick. Maybe a little thinner, but like that. And if I just click on the anchor points that I've previously drawn, let's see if it'll work. It'll pull up my width point dialog box. And that way I can just type in exactly what I want. I don't have to eyeball it. I can start keeping things consistent if I want. So like if I want that to be my thin, I can go down to 3 here in total width. And I can say, okay, and that'll start taking it back down to my hairline that I have. So this is kind of a fun thing to mess around with if you're like, oh, I want to make a really fancy script, but I don't know how I'm going to like keep my consistencies. This can be a really fun thing to try. So let's get our width variation tool again. I want it to end on a very thin. So I'm going to just pull that in, and I'm going to, again, double click on my endpoint and just take that down. Maybe I'll take it down to, we'll just do 2. We'll see how that looks. And you can see we're creating some nice variation here. The other cool thing that you can do is once you've got your points, if I have that width variation that I set right there, I can click and drag it. Ooh, let's see if it'll let me do it. There we go. I can click and drag it if I want to readjust where it's carrying the most weight. So that's kind of nice too. And then you can continue to finesse and just kind of mess around. Let's do some weight here because this tail, this bottom portion could definitely use something. Maybe it's more like here. And then we'll double click here and we'll make that 3 again. And it doesn't always work exactly as you plan. Sometimes you have to add a few more points to really to make sure that it's turning out the way you like. So just add as many points as you need. I will say the fewer points, the better. If you get too many of these width variation points, it really gets hard to manage sometimes. And you can see if I have this selected up in my little width variation, or sorry, variable width profile section, you can see it's creating this special brush for me basically. So you could save this and try to use it again. It's usually not that simple, but it's kind of fun to mess around with. And you can just continue to kind of like, maybe we'll pull this around. I think the weight would be carried a little bit more like around here. And then it would probably end a little bit sooner. It would thin out a little bit sooner. Maybe it goes like that. And maybe it continues to get a little thicker again here. Oh yeah, that's nice. And then I can just add maybe like some ball terminals at the end. Maybe that would look nice. You can see that when I drew my new path, it's adopting the brush that I had previously set. So it looks absolutely insane. So we'll just fill that instead. Can add some ball terminals to the end. Maybe that looks interesting. I can even get my pen tool out. Maybe I want this to be a little bit more bracketed. So I can create a nice little stroke ending there. Maybe it looks more like that, more like a teardrop kind of. We're working fast, so it's not perfect, but it's looking fairly good. Ted Beta says that is a cool tool. It is. It is. If you can kind of harangue it, it's pretty fun, and it's a really nice way to just quickly get an idea out. And then I'll usually outline it and, outline the pass, outline the strokes, and kind of finesse it from there. But this will get you started. So that's the width variation tool. So we'll pull this one over here. So we have that to look at. I can scale it up. Looks great. The next thing that I use all the time in my lettering, especially when I'm trying to draw something like a sans serif where there's a lot of angular geometry, like, the fix of, the I and the H and the N, those are all very similar and they're very rigid. I like to just use my shape tool. I like to use my rectangles, my circles, and then I use my Pathfinder tool to really help me kind of finesse from there. So, for example, on this piece of shine on lettering that we made the other day, if I draw out my rectangle, that's about the width of my stem of my N or my H, for example, make it a little thinner. I can just pull this up and I'm going to use my shear tool and match the italics. And it's just a really quick way to work. Now, if you're not great at using your pen tool, the other cool way you can use this, because we used this the other day and it's like, okay, yeah, but what else? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and cut off this top portion using my Pathfinder tool. Just get rid of that. So I've got the right-hand side of my stem of my H, right? But maybe I'm not good at drawing rounds and maybe I'm a little bit afraid to draw the shoulder, the rounded portion of this H. Well, guess what? You can use this elliptical, is that it? Ellipsy tool? I don't know what any of these tools are called. It's embarrassing. Call myself a professional designer. All right. And I can just make a circle for that round. I can cut it like maybe right here. And that creates a really nice round for me. And then I can just adjust the points from there. And I'm saving myself a lot of heartache and it just looks nicer than me trying to draw some wonky thing. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to readjust a little, but it can be a really great place to start. So let's go back to our circle, for example, and let's just make this a little bit bigger. Say we do more like this, and then we continue our path down. I'll have to scale it down a bit so that it meets up. Now what you can do is, if I select my rectangle, I can cut this top line segment that connects this rectangle, and I can join these two things, these two shapes that I just made because they're both open paths now. So what I can do is I can use my direct selection tool, which is A, and I can just draw a rectangle around those 2 points and I can join them. I can go object, path, join. The shortcut for that is also Command J. And you can see I'm creating lettering in an absolute cinch. Don't I sound like I'm selling something on the Home Shopping Network? It's like, those blenders are like a ninja food processor. So then you can just option drag that outer shape that we had for our H. You can copy it, make it a little bit smaller, and we're going to make the counter now. So I've scaled it down. I'm going to again use my cut tool. So I'm going to go my scissors. I'm just going to go C, and I'm going to cut off this bottom portion here. And I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to turn it white so you all can kind of see what I'm doing. Maybe I'll even turn it red just so that we all kind of know. This is what I'm aiming to make my inside shape out of. And I can kind of line it up. And now I'll direct select that path. And again, I'm going to draw a box and I'm going to join Command J. And now I have a beautiful little H, the left-hand side of my H, or right-hand side of my H. And again, it takes a little finessing and sometimes it won't be perfect, but it'll be pretty close. I'll maybe, bring this out a little bit so that looks better. And maybe I'll even bring this down a bit so that matches up. And now I can just option drag and copy that for my N. And then once you're done, all of these are live paths right now. I can close up these paths, but I can also just Pathfinder these two things together. So I can just open my Pathfinder, clean it up really nicely. Say you're delivering a logo file. You'll want to make sure you clean all those paths up and make sure you don't have any open paths that could get awkward if, they deliver these files to someone else to use and they mess around with it. So I always outline my strokes. I always Pathfinder all of my paths and make sure every shape is closed. So that looks really nice. You can just direct select the stem of this H and get your N, just like we did previously. And that's such an easy way to work. So for this E, for example, we could do the same thing. We start with a circle because we want to get this left-hand side of this E. And I'm just going to option drag down another circle, make it a little bit bigger because I've got my sketch guide. And I'm going to cut them at our extrema because I think that's easiest on shapes like O or this E, for example. I'm going to cut the extrema So I can cut off this right-hand side and do the same on here. Get rid of those. And I'm going to start connecting. So I'm going to use my pen tool and I'm going to connect these two things if I can find it. There it is. And I'm just continuing on my drawing. And if I want to make sure that everything's consistent, I can just option drag this little stem that I already have. Actually, I'll do it this one and just rotate it. And I can pull a ruler down for my guide, make sure it's all straight. And that way I make sure that I have everything's the same, everything's consistent. And I can just drag that in and that can be my leg of my E. You're just adjusting points as you go. Now I can option drag this up. I've got the top of my E too. And I can, again, join those paths. And it's just a matter of taking shapes. Every letter that you've ever seen is just shapes. If you kind of break it down that way, it's kind of like when you're in art class, right? And they tell you that drawing, if your brain is thinking too much and it thinks it knows what it can see, you need to look at it upside down because your brain is trying to overthink it. And can't we all just relate? So don't overthink it. Think about, what shapes am I seeing? What is this letter made out of? It's just a round, it's just a rectangle, maybe a couple of other things, but you can see I'm already building this E very quickly. Another cool thing is when you have all these rectangular shapes, a lot of times I like to do a rounded corner edge. Well, that becomes incredibly easy with these, with these shapes that you've already made. You just select your character that you've just made, click A to do direct select, and that will pull up your corners tool up here, and you can just quickly round your corners. Now that's rounded everything. That's even rounded this little joint here. Maybe I don't want that. So maybe we undo, we go back. Guess what? You can just round a few things. Let's just select the top of this H, the ascender, and let's just select the baseline. I think that'll look good rounded. Maybe we don't need everything. And we can round just those. Yeah, that looks way better. So you can see how quick that is. So let's finish up this little E that we've got going on. I'm going to, again, cut this. And you could have even just duplicated the top if you wanted it to be very exact, but I like the bottom half of my E to be a little bit bigger when I'm doing a backwards 3E. So I'm just going to join those paths. And then now I can go in and I can even just draw with my pen tool if I feel confident and create the little midsection. Maybe it's a little extra thin. We'll do everything flat now, and then we'll kind of get our shear later. The cool thing about shear is I think people oftentimes forget you can shear specific points too, just the way that we only rounded, certain portions of this letter because we wanted this to be sharp. You can also use the shear tool on certain things. So right now, this is all one path, right? If I direct select just my stroke endings on this E, I just want those to be sheared. I can then go to my shear tool and click and drag from there, and you can see it's just shearing the ends. How cool is that? And then you can just direct select and kind of adjust. And that looks pretty good. And you might even when you draw things yourself, it can be easy to forget the little details. And we talked about that the other day is when you know the details, that's when it really becomes special. It's like looking for those little things. Well, if I select my rounds on the counter of this E, which is the negative space, I realize those probably should be sheared as well because the outside of those are sheared. So when you're making your own lettering, you have to think about that because it's not a font designer that's, created this thing for you that you're just kind of finessing. So now I'm going to shear again, and I'm going to shear these two inside points. And you can see, yeah, that's way more consistent. That feels way better than it did before. And it's as easy as that. So if I was to make this S, we can use the round corners again in a really great way. So first I'm just going to do super angular. How would this work if I was just drawing it in angles? Just think angularly with me for 1 second. So if I did it like that, and I want this to follow, now I can direct select my top left and my bottom right corners because I want to round those. I want to make that an S. And we are quickly just making our S. Now the inside looks awful because the rounding on the inside needs to be a little bit less. So we're going to select those inside corners and just do those a little less. And I already have an S. Isn't that cool? So it's pretty awesome how you can do these fun little things and get somewhere pretty quick. So that's our tips for today. Definitely try these out. Try these on your next project. Do something fun and definitely tag us. We are at hashtag Adobe Live if you care to share on, Behance or Instagram or anything like that. And we will be back tomorrow doing a Q&A. So if you love type design, if you love lettering and you have some questions, we've worked with a bunch of amazing clients from Nike to Target to just so many awesome people. And we would love to talk with you about lettering. So submit your lettering and type design questions. They will link it. Sam, our handy moderator, will link it in the chat. Definitely submit those for tomorrow and tune in at the same place, same time. Thanks so much, you all. It was a great joy having you here. I'm your host, Amy Hood, signing off.